Hey guys, this is Ajmal. We are here for the next episode with Sidhush, who's a serial entrepreneur. Today, he'll be talking about his journey and also the importance of content in his journey so far. So, welcome, Sidhush.
Thank you, Ajmal. Nice to have
Uh,
you, bro.
how things there?
Oh, don't ask. It's pretty terrible. I mean, the markets have plummeted quite a bit. At least when I'm talking about the tertiary sector, right? Markets have plummeted. Everyone's trying to get back on their feet, but
Mhm.
it's a very I think it's a very different scenario where we have to pick between staying alive and actually keeping businesses alive.
Yeah,
So like I think the authorities are doing that. So it's
I just
okay. We're
hope
recovering.
things get back to normal as soon as possible.
Oh yeah, man. I'm praying for the same. I really want to get out. I have to go down back to Goa. I'm in Gujarat right now, by the way. I have to go down back to Goa and get work kickstarted again. So yeah.
Okay. So, Sidhush, tell us about yourself. Like, what do you do?
So I happen to run an event company called Project Muziki, which indulges in corporate and commercial events.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main thing that I do. After this whole lockdown came into existence, I said let's open up a learning portal for not active but very passive learning. So I've got a YouTube channel called Orbata, which does exactly that. um, so I run that. I'm doing interviews for that. Out of that project, we have another initiative called APSO now, which is an employability initiative, and that's something I've also been doing on the side. Plus, I also happen to be the CTO of a Hong Kong-based funding company called CC International Holdings Limited. What we do is we encourage student entrepreneurs to put their plans to actual action. We help them out with government as well as non-government funding sources. So this is what I do.
So, in terms of
This is on my plate so far.
so when you say
Yeah.
Sissy helps with funding, do they only do with help with funding, or do they also mentor them and guide them along the way? How does it go?
So it's an all around thing, right? Because I mean, let's be honest, you can't get a funding if you don't have a strong first of all, if you don't have a strong plan. Secondly, if you don't have it well documented. So of course we guide them from start to finish. The company has been founded by two kinds of people, by entrepreneurs and businessmen, and also by professors who teach entrepreneurship in some of the colleges in Hong Kong. So it's a very good coalition between the education behind a business and the practical experience that comes into being. So obviously we guide these students quite a bit. Not just students, actually, we have a lot of people who've signed up with us that are not students as well. So yeah, we help them with market study. We help them with documenting analysis of the results. We help them with prototype creation, testing the prototype, things like that. So that, considering I am the CTO, I'm the technical guy behind it. That's
Mm.
sort of my job that falls to me, is to test prototypes and things like that. So that's sort of my ballpark. But we give a proper end-to-end solution to it. The end goal, of course, is for someone's project to be able to generate revenue. Oftentimes what happens is we have to switch plans around and edit someone's plans and things like that. So all that
Mhm.
comes into happening. I think it's all a part of a rather long run process. Yeah.
So, prior to Orbita and being the CTO of Sissy, what were you doing?
So like I mentioned, I had this event company which I was doing. So my journey goes back to my college days. I was a student in Hong Kong, which is basically how it all started. I started my own event firm there with three other friends of mine, all of whom were like much elder to me. They were all like PhD applicants at the time and things like that. We started a company over there. We started doing events, and it was mostly we had started it for some cash on the side. That was the whole idea behind it. But then it kind of we got better at it. The events, the quality of the events, the ingenuity behind the ideation process of the events became something that made us bigger than what we didn't expect to sort of be. And that sort of, the love for events sort of carried on, right?
Mm.
Like and then when I came back to India, I said I don't think so. I was an engineering student, right? So I was like, I don't think engineering is for me anymore. I was like, no, I'm more in love with the
The
journey
typical
than the
engineering story.
yeah, typical engineering story. Like, but even if you look at India right now, the surplus of engineers, like literally, I'm sure, like in this entire street that I live, like I'm sure like at least 70 to 80% of these people would be holding some sort of
Especially
engineering
when it
degree.
comes to content creators, you will find a lot of people are engineers for some reason. Because
True,
yesterday I was
true.
looking at an interview of, it's a very old interview of Beer Biceps and Rahul Subramanian, and both of them are
Okay.
engineers.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, totally, man, totally. So engineers, I think we have that. We have a very logical, step-by-step approach to things, right? We can really put an algorithm to work, because that's exactly what we call it. We call it an algorithm. So we can do that. So I guess that's that. So anyway, I came back. I was like, I want to start my own event company, and I said, well, how do I go about getting clients? Because I haven't been in India for God knows how long. Before I got to Hong Kong, I was in Indonesia for close to 8 9 years. So I was like, I haven't touched India in forever. How do I get back in touch with people? How do I go about? So I said, let me do a job. Let me get into a job kind of situation, which is going to get me closer to the people that are willing to spend a lot of money over a shorter duration of time. Hello, travel and tourism industry, paying lakhs and lakhs of rupees to spend 10 days in Europe. Yeah, great, great. That's my kind of clientele, right? Because that's what happens with events.
Mhm.
Eventually, you're looking at a lot of money being spilled over a few days of fun, which is basically
You
how
are
weddings
Sirute.
generally work. So I started there. I gained a clientele. I was in this industry for close to 1.5 years, and then I said, let's start my own company. It's about time. So I moved to Goa, got in touch with vendors, things like that, and yeah, it all started off. Initially, I said, let me pick up a few weddings and things like that. Let me pick up a few artist management contracts here and there. But now the whole thing is very much focused to corporate clients, as well as to commercial events like music festivals, film festivals, art festivals, etc.
Mhm.
So it's very focused now. uh, that's what I do. That's my thing right now. And of course, when Corona hit, that sort of took a very very bad turn. So we're hoping to recover from it soon. Before all these different things, this is what I had. Yeah.
Okay. So when you were again, I understand that the events industry is quite hectic, right? So amidst all of this,
Yeah.
what made you launch Aur Bata?
Event industry was hectic. Yes. So when you're in Goa, first of all, you are in the epicenter of everything that starts and ends with events. Okay? You've got the best musicians from Goa. You've got the best environment, the best ambience. People come there for partying purposes. Like that is literally the impression the rest of India has of Goa. In my opinion, not the right impression to have, but theek hai. That's what happens, right? Main revenue that people earn, like even in Goa, like if you think about it, every second person, like I just told you about engineers over here, every second person in Goa is involved in some form of event industry, some way. Someone is a vendor for sound. We have light vendors. I have friends who are vendors for like literally anything and everything. I have one vendor solely for all casino related things. So tables, roulettes, dice, all those different things is all his. He's like one and whole and soul one department only. So like that, there are a lot of people that do events over there, and in different segments and things like that, in different ways involved in it. So when you are in Goa, it's taken for granted that you will be involved in a lot of different events. You will be involved in a lot of different projects, small and big, mostly small, but then even in Maharashtra, Karnataka, etc., you get bigger projects as well. So amidst all this, when all this happened, and I moved back to Baroda, which is, by the way, where my family is in Gujarat. Like, so I was like, what's the first thing I do when I can't do business? I take rest. I sleep. I catch up on that, because you're spending days and weeks on like 3 hours a day. 4 hours a day is a luxury. So I mean, my whole thing was I need to catch a breather. Then amongst all this, I realized that I was supposed to launch another sort of brand with a few associates that I knew at the time, and we were supposed to have a passive learning platform in the form of webinars, right? So, and that also started with mostly soft skills. So we'll talk about how to go about organizing things, how to go about ideation, how to go about things like that. So things that you can't learn in books, basically. That didn't work out, and I was like, hey, this is too good an idea for me to give up on. What do I do? Then I started looking at what we were trying to do a lot more critically, right? I sat down with a pen and paper. I was like, okay, let's think of a new way to launch this. What are the platforms I can launch this on? Do I need my own hosted platform, or can I take it on a rented platform for now? What should the format of the whole thing be? I went top to bottom trying to understand how to go about it, and that's when this whole Orbita concept happened, where I said there's very little downside to the way I'm doing things. Let's see how it goes. So I launched like 3 interviews. They were all with friends, and I was like, let's see now what. And then I got in touch with some of my old friends from the event industry itself, and I was like, yeah, now it's gonna work. Because now through Orbita, through my event company, I had managed to work with a lot of different kinds of people, right? So you get to work with a lot of corporate clients. So you get in touch with a lot of presidents, vice presidents, chairmen, CEOs of these companies, right? Since you're also an entrepreneur, it's very natural for you to sort of be in touch with other young entrepreneurs, whether through a network or even without a network. Wherever you go, you'll always find someone who's doing their own thing, right? So that was how I got in touch with a lot of entrepreneurs. Most importantly, I got in touch with all the celebrities, right? Whoever I've worked with, celebrities that I've managed to work with, got in touch with all of them. And I was like, all right, so now I've got a plethora of information on my end. And like I've said on, I think, a couple of videos before, I literally had the opportunity of sitting down and talking to these guys at least once over a cup of coffee or whatever it is. I heard their stories. I said, well, this is learning, isn't it? This is somehow, this is how people learn at the end of the day. It's like, let's do this. Let's do this. Yeah. I don't like calling the platform a motivational platform, and yet that is sort of what it does. It inspires people. Right? So that's how Orbita happened. And like you mentioned, it wasn't so much of an organic move. Like one wouldn't think, okay, this is the next step for an event company to go. But it is something that I detached from the event company a lot. The only reason I still sort of say the event company has something to do with it is because I met all these lovely people that I have now gotten on the channel. So yeah, that's that.
Okay. So coming to the topic for today, you wanted to talk about the importance of content when running a business, right? Could you elaborate more on that?
What is content? Content, like a lot of people think content is just information. Maybe that is the textbook definition of it, but I believe that information without context is kind of irrelevant, right? So content in my books is basically, you have a time frame, you have a location, you have a milieu to it, you have certain context to anything, and within that context you have an entire diaspora of information. When presented in that form, it is content. Like this interview, for instance, you're a content creator, I'm a content creator, right? This is going up on a content creation platform. I happen to run businesses, therefore the context is very relevant to this. And when the context is relevant, and now that we are talking about things like this, the information that we're putting out together, right, that makes it very wholesome, that makes it very relevant content. Now when I talk about businesses, okay, every business is goal driven. Okay? You have certain it, and maybe it's not just profitability. It can be a lot of different things which hint at profitability, long term as well as short term, right? How do you put the message out? How do you go about communicating what your needs are to your clients? How do you go about communicating what your needs are in a B2B circle? There are different ways in which you do it. But if you look at how it's done, when you look at all kinds of corporate communication when it comes to businesses, it's all content at the end of the day, isn't it? Because there is a market situation, then there is the internal situation of a company, and all that put together lays down a very good foundation for all the steps that this company is going to take further. When they take that step further and communicate their needs with whoever their stakeholders are, that's content at the end of the day. You're putting out an image, you're putting out information, you're putting out your intention, right? That's content at the end of the day. So I think it's very relevant how we look at businesses in a content creation viewpoint, and how we also look at content creation with the idea of business, because that's the other aspect of it, right? Like you can also like switch it around, and you can be like, can content creation enhance your business, or does business enhance your content creation thing? I think it works both ways, right? So yeah, this is why I feel this is a very relevant thing to talk about at the end of the day. Yeah.
So when you talk about content, right, what goes in the background of creating content? Like how do you measure if it did well, especially when you're starting out? you don't initially get a lot of views or feedback on was that the desired result that you expected from the content that you posted, be it on whatever platform?
That's a fantastic question. That's a fantastic question. That's a fantastic question. Um, when I started off the YouTube channel, at least I can tell you about this. When I started off the YouTube channel, I made sure that I knew the platform inside out. Right? There's some people who say there are dark parts to YouTube. I went through those as well. I went through the darkest and the brightest parts of YouTube, and I was basically I managed to scour the platform left, right, and center, and then say, all right, this is sort of the platform I'm going to work in. I need to create a niche for myself. With that said, I think it's very important to understand what kind of content will sell, right? Because it's like a chicken and the egg kind of situation where you're like, am I marketing my content right and therefore I'm getting views, or will I get views and then will my content boom up? Like, will the views boom up? Like, which way do I go? Do I market the content or create good content? And I think both go hand in hand, right? But my thing is simple, right? You can't have a decent marketing campaign for your content if you don't have good content in the first place, right? A good marketing campaign can sell anything. Yes, true. But once people start to realize your content is BS, they're not going to be able to sort of relate, and you lose credibility at the end of the day. Like, people will say, all right, this guy is bringing up content, fine. Like, if you look at my YouTube channel, there's a lot of repetition. There's like interviews. But if you look at every interview, even if it's two people from the same industry, you're not going to get the similar content, right? Like, I've got 3 actresses on my channel right now, and when you listen to the interviews with all 3 of them, they're all talking about very different things in their life. I'm not only talking about their own lives, I'm also talking about aspects that are relevant to their careers and things like that. Okay? So there is a variety. What I feel about content creation, and this is how you create good content, like you asked me, like what will sell and what won't. You have to be, first of all, very aware of what platform this content is going on. So you need to do your research very well, and you need to find a hole. You need to find a niche for yourself where you can fit in. You look at the shape of this niche or this hole, like I'm taking that analogy, right? You shape yourself accordingly and you fit into it. If you don't do that, you will just be piling onto a huge stack of people who are already in that hole or already in that niche, right? And that's not going to get you anywhere. Once your intent is clear, which niche you want to tackle, with what you want to do, okay? Once your intent is clear, you, first of all, when you're sitting down, you need to put it in words. Okay? Even though you're not going to show it to anyone, make a document for yourself, because while writing, you will understand, okay, these are the things that I need to accomplish. These are the goals that I have for the entire channel or whatever that you're creating. Maybe it's Instagram content, maybe it would be TikTok content, whatever it is. Once that intent is clear, figure out a way to execute that. Okay, figure out what it's going to look like visually. And once you're done doing that, once you're done actually making the content, ideating it, maybe even creating a prototype for that content, look at the impact. I think that is where everyone suffers. Okay? And this is a theory that I talk about. It's intent versus impact. Okay? If you intend to do a certain thing, but your impact is very different, you're not going anywhere. Right? I'll give you a very simple example. Right? If the intent is, if I say something along the lines of, all right, I don't like Apple at all. I mean, it's made in China, but whatever it is, I'm just doing what I'm stating a fact. But the impact that it could have in, because of the way I've said it, is, oh, this guy doesn't like products made in China. Do you get what I mean? So if the impact on the audiences isn't exactly aligned with your intent, first of all, there's going to be miscommunication, which is very obvious. I think all controversy on in the content creation world happens because of this. Like we just saw Shane Dawson and the whole Carmageddon thing happening. All that is just, it's just, every content creator has sort of messed up the intent versus impact thing at one point in their life, and that's why all these controversies happen. So when your intent and impact are aligned, okay, that's a good thing. But if it's not, you'll have miscommunication. More than anything else, people will be confused, because you have identified a niche for yourself. You're wanting to attack it. But because of the way you're delivering the content, you're not able to do that, because your impact is something else altogether. You're not shooting yourself through that hole. You're not going through that process. You're not fitting in. You are in turn creating content that someone else has already created, or making it in a form that does not necessarily achieve the goal that you wanted to achieve. Once your intent and impact are aligned, it's definitely going to sell. If you've done the right research, you figure out the intent, you do it in a way where the impact is if not equal to, then at least close to the intent, you're through. Your content will sell for sure. Right? It's not right now the channel is doing pretty well, right? And it's people I was just on a Zoom call with my friends like a couple of days ago, right? My school friends, and they were like, Sid, we never thought you could make content. Like, we never thought you could get on YouTube and make videos and all. And because I was a very studious kid back in school. Like I was proper like front bencher, acing exams and shit like that. So people didn't really look at me in that role. Right? So they were like, how does one start a YouTube channel and kick it off and make it that damn successful in one go? Like, how does that happen? And I told them the exact same. I was like, if you do your market study right, figure out an intent, get an impact going, which is equal to your intent, you're through. That's how it will sell. You know why? Because you've done your work, you've done your homework, and you're doing it, right? The chances of that product failing is like very low. So I think this is how content can sell. Then obviously you've got to market that content. I'm not saying if you don't market that content, it's not gonna pick up. It will pick up, but it'll be much slower. Right? Then you also need to figure out how do you sell the content. Content selling or media marketing is that phase, or that again you have to do your homework on that as well. But I feel if your content is good, it will sell. Maybe not today, maybe I don't know, months from now, weeks from now, whatever it is. I was just looking at one of these statistics which said for an average YouTube channel to reach 1,000 subscribers, the average amount of time taken is 22 months.
Oh.
I did the math, right? And obviously it's an exponential curve. It's a very exponential curve. I remember when I was doing this whole thing, I was like, how many subs do I need in the third month to be able to reach 1,000 in 22 months? I had done all the projections and things like that, and I figured if you have close to around 80 to 100 subs in your third month, you're looking good, because eventually the curve's going to go up. It's an exponential curve. It's not going to be a linear growth. You're going to slowly and gradually gather and jump the number of subs again and again and again. And by 22 months, you're going to hit the 1,000 wala mark. What I didn't realize then, and this is why I crossed 1,000 subs very quickly, is that this is a varied sort of approach, right? There's the variance in this is huge. There's some channels who do it in a week. There's some channels who do it in a few months. There's some channels who do it in a few years, right? The variance is too huge. So I think with every channel, with the nature of content, and if intent matches impact, it's a good way of going about selling your content quickly, because you are like any consumer and industry relationship, you're selling to a client at the end of the day. You're giving them a product that they have been looking for, or they have been asked. One thing is clear: everything in life, everything in society that is scarce or that does not exist previously, that is innovative in that matter, will always be valued. So if that's what is being delivered, then I mean you're through. That's how you grow quicker, and that's how you get there. Yeah.
That was very, very, very insightful. Thank you. So the next question is, you interacted with a lot of startups through Arbata, right? So I want you to share one interview which you found really interesting in terms of the marketing strategy, something really interesting.
Particular to entrepreneurs?
It can be anything, like one interview which is very memorable that you found this was a really good interview, which I did.
Oh boy. Oh my God. You know what the problem with that question is? If I pick one, everyone's gonna be like, you didn't like my interview, huh? It's just one of those things. But what I can tell you is, I think uh, that's a particularly tough question. If I'm talking about entrepreneurs, then definitely I would want to go back to the very first interview that I did, which was Anandita Roy. I think that was a beautiful start. She was in a very different state of her business at the time, and she was also sort of in the middle of marketing her thing far and wide, and she's done a fantastic job out of it coming out of the interview. And even I think around the time the interview started also, she was doing it pretty well. uh, it gave her a lot of exposure, and I realized people were talking about it a lot. And I said, this is the kind of difference I can bring to a business. I mean, that's very interesting. I did another interview. I posted another interview very recently with a certain Mr. Sagar Bhalotia, who is the founder of this company called Tags Foods, first FMCG company on the channel as well. And they have this, they have figured out this technology where they can pop potatoes like popcorn and make chips out of it. And I'm like, wow, like that's innovative. I was like, I have to bring you, bro. I have to bring you on the channel. Like, yeah, let's do it. And very soon he sent me a packet of chips and things. Like, he sent me like a box of chips, and he was like, ah, this is for you. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna review this. And now I made a second video on a review on that thing, and then now we're also looking at other kinds of campaigns that we can run in coalition with each other. So that was like my first proper brand placement thing. Um, it's been interesting being part of Orbata and doing what I do, simply because I realize I can bring a huge difference to people's lives. Like, I wouldn't like to name. There was a corporate leader that I interviewed, and she told me much later that she was like, said, I've gotten a lot of offers now right after this interview. Like, people have watched this interview and I'm getting like job offers for like higher positions. And I'm like, is it just because the interview? She's like, yeah, pretty much, because I was here, I was doing my thing, and then this thing happened. With entrepreneurs as well, like I think it's all about getting the word out. It's all about marketing themselves very well. And I have been very fortunate to meet a lot of young entrepreneurs, a lot of fun people. Like one of the fun interviews I did was ATVC, which is basically an ATV racing corporation called Infileague Motorsports. So the founders are younger than me. Like, so I was like, okay, this is also a very interesting thing. I've made some very sweet personal connections throughout. I met my girlfriend through this whole Orbata thing. So it's just when you're marketing, I wouldn't say marketing, but when you're talking to people like this, right, whose stories are heard or unheard of, you're always going to come up with something or the other that's very interesting. So I can't pick one, honestly, but I think each and every one of them has given me a very different perspective to what things are like and what they do. So I think that's kind of essential.
So you did not pick one. Safe play.
Do you want me to? I mean, I don't mind. Like, it'll
Just
end
kidding.
me
Just
up in
kidding.
a world of trouble.
Just
No.
kidding.
Honestly,
No. I'm just
no.
kidding.
Dude, this interview drops, and and everyone I'm interviewing like, okay, you didn't like my interview, huh?
My
Because I
name
have this
wasn't there.
habit after, So I always have this habit of after the interview, I give them a call and I say, hey, listen, thanks a lot. I think if there are some issues, I think I may have some issues with audio. I may take some time. I don't know what it's like. So I usually let them know how it's going to go, whatever it is. But yeah, I have a very good bond with all of them. I didn't want to pick one, but
I'm just kidding.
yeah, that's that. That's that.
Okay, so let's talk about your next venture right now. You've started a platform for job seekers.
Yes.
Can you elaborate more on that and why you wanted to start it?
So it just so happened that I interviewed someone called Meena Chabria on the channel, who happens to be the vice president of brands and alliances in PVR. Okay, and she's based out of Coimbatore, Bangalore. She's in Bangalore for the most part. Now the thing is, Meena one day posts something about someone looking for a job, something of that sort. And actually, just before she does that, she calls me up and she goes, listen, Sid, I want to try and do a referral service for people who are looking for jobs, because a lot of people have lost jobs and taken pay cuts during the quarantine. So I was like, okay, let's do it. I mean, I don't know how you want to go about it. Do you have a plan? Do you have a pilot to this that you want to launch? Is there something? She's like, let me see how it goes. Let's figure it out after that. So right after that, what Meena did was she posted a video of herself that she took on her phone, and she posts it up. She puts it up on LinkedIn, and she says, so and so is looking for a job. She tags the guy who's looking for a job, and I was like, okay, if this is a pilot, it's a good idea. And then we sat down and we sort of started talking about why we want it to be that way, why we want to make it a video referral sort of a model. And it just so happens that we realized this whole refer a friend model in the US, the UK, and Canada and things like that works like that. What happens is, if you refer your friend or your relative or someone to the employer, you get a 20 to 30% kickback on their salary straight away. Okay? That's a given. That's a referral system that is, earlier it wasn't so common. I think in some parts of the countries it is a proper formal process. So we said, let's bring that to India, except let's make it in a video form. That was her idea. Then I told her, I saw her video, I was like, why aren't we getting these people to talk for themselves? Why do we have to tell everybody in our words? Like, the idea was, sure, we were both part of HR circles. I'm still a part of so many HR circles. She's in like 10 times more influential in terms of HR circles as compared to me. So I was like, why are we talking to them straight away when we can also have the voice of these people who want these jobs to come forth and actually talk about their needs and things like that, and their whole background and their history, and if they've gone through something during the lockdown job wise, we can ask them to talk about it, right? They have a voice, let's bring their voice forth. Which is why basically it's the whole model is your voice, your stories, right? So that's basically how the sort of foreground to this whole thing.
What is it
um
called?
so the initiative is called Aap Sunao. Now here's the thing, okay, with names, I have to admit I'm a terrible namer. Okay, I suck at naming companies, projects, everything. Okay, but Aur Bata happened as like one of those things where I was literally thinking of the most relatable thing that people say, people think of, and it's a very conversational thing when you're talking to someone, and you run out of something to talk to when you go, or Bata kya chal raha hai, right? So I was like, let's call it Aur Bata. When Aap Sunao happened, I was like, okay, what do we name this thing, right? Because Aur Bata is basically a very informal sort of conversational thing. This is a little more corporate oriented. This is a little more serious. This is a little more, because it's about jobs. It's about employability. There has to be a certain formal vibe to it. So Meena and I were literally like, what do I call this? And she's like, just call it a formal version of Aur Bata. I was like, what? It's like Aap Sunao. I was like, if I'm going to name it Aap Sunao, there has to be some logic to it. And at the same time, in the parallel, we were also thinking about the whole your voice, your stories kind of model, right? So I was like, okay, if I'm going to bring people's voices to the forefront, what am I doing? I'm basically asking people to talk up and to speak up about what they want. So I was like, then that makes sense, because people are talking about their stories. We as an organization, as well as employers, would definitely want to hear these stories. So let's go with Aap Sunao. So that's how we came up with the name, right? So uh, the basic idea now that we are running on is, people fill out a form. We've got a video section where we want them to put like a video of maximum 1 minute long, talking about themselves, talking about what their experience level is, what their previous jobs were like, and what they're looking forward to, or if they want to talk about their stories, something of that sort. Another thing we noticed was, video CVs weren't so popular in India. Right? Maybe they were just popular in tier 1 cities, but tier 2, tier 3 cities where this corona thing has actually taken a bad turn, video CVs, not a thing. So this can be the closest that we can come to actually making a personal video CV. I'm not talking about having a video with cool edits, with a profile, with great infographics, with great transitions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people just looking at each other going, listen, this is what I need, and I hope you can sort of, just looking into a camera going, this is what I've gone through. I'm ready to sort of, move into any kind of position. This is what I want, blah, 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 blah. And that's that, right? The other thing, of course, that we noticed was, it's difficult for interviews to happen, because like a lot of people don't necessarily have good access to internet, or they don't have connectivity, or even if they do have all of those things, it just becomes difficult to coordinate, things like that. There are a lot of people doing interviews and things like that. So why don't we take these guys' profiles to the recruiters, rather than them launching an interview and saying, okay, you know what, there's a position available and things like that. So we were like, let's do that. And yeah, that's the model. I've already put up one video on this. Another video goes up on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
So that's what's, yeah. So we're basically we're doing that one video at a time. We've already got quite a few applicants. We have a list of 400 plus people who are looking for jobs. That list is only growing, right?
Nice.
So I mean, we hope to help everybody one person at a time, one story at a time, uh, and it's not a very ambitious project. We don't want to sort of overkill with the information plethora, or we don't want to overkill ourselves, and because it's just me and Meena working on it, to be honest, right? So we don't want to make it too crazy either. We want to do as much as we can, and I feel like the smaller steps are what will matter the most at the end of the day. So yeah.
So when you started your own firm, what what was your initial struggle that you faced?
Oh shit. Let's not kid ourselves. What is the initial struggle every business has, every entrepreneur has? Um, of course, you don't know um, what it entails to open up a new business, right? Like, because I don't know now, but at least in the education system till say 2012, 13, you didn't have any proper entrepreneurship skills that were being taught as a part of the educational system.
True.
So you don't necessarily know what it takes. You learn commerce, sure. You have business studies classes and things like that. Great. But that doesn't tell you the practical aspect of things, right? Does it? So initially, of course, like there are a lot of struggles, right? Like one of them is, of course, like I mentioned, how to go about starting this whole thing is a struggle. Who to contact, how to contact, what are the systems and processes involved. And what most people do is they take up a job, right? They work a corporate job, they get in touch with people who are in the same industry. With events, this thing happens very often. You join a big event company, you learn what you need to, you move on, you open your own thing. That's event industry standards. That's what happens. Okay? But um, with me, I was basically, my whole issue wasn't anything like that, simply because I realized those things can be learned, right? If something can be learned, it's not a problem, right? If you have to unlearn a process that you already know or are stuck with, and you need to relearn a new process, maybe that will be a struggle, but it can be done. It's just up here. It's a mindset thing, right? So those weren't struggles for me. The struggle I faced the most was funding, because the reason I started this whole thing was basically what I wanted to earn cash on the side. So what do I do? I don't have cash on the side. How do I put it into the company? What do I do? I don't want to raise an inventory. So the initial struggle was, and the reason we took close to, I think, 2.5 months to sort of lift off to the extent that we were looking to lift off from, was simply because we weren't really well funded. We started off with university events and things like that because one of us used to get a grant from the provost of the college for basically student welfare and things like that. So they were supposed to do like camping trips and um, barbecue parties and just casual get-togethers, like team building things, basically. So we used those funds to sort of generate very subsidized events within the university setting, and then we moved on to other universities. Then we made it a very commercial thing. It would have been quicker if we had an investor out there, right? So that was the initial struggle when back in the day when I was 18, right? The other struggle was I didn't have anyone to sort of mentor me. Now I could learn this, I could read enough, I could watch as many interviews, I could talk to a lot of people. I never really had a mentor. And in that regard, I was happy that I was with people that were, experienced, more experienced than me in life. I was the youngest on the team, right? And the second youngest guy on the team, we were four of us, and the second youngest guy on the team was 25 at the time. So you can imagine, right? So I was like, okay, this is I'm like literally the underdog over here. I'm here on the team to generate more revenue out of, or to generate more of a reach in terms of the undergraduate department, because these guys are more into the whole postgraduate and PhD crowds, and I'm the only one there who's like in the bachelor's wala crowd. So my job was to stir that market and churn those people and get as many footfalls as we could from there. So I knew my role, I understood what I was supposed to do, and I had to go through a lot of reinventing the processes in which I was marketing the event, reinventing the actual concepts of the event, re-innovating everything. So we came up with concepts that were like very outrageous, and then we boiled it down to something very doable at a very decent price point. Because I think at the time the other aspect was, due to a lot of circumstances, we were also trying to make it affordable events. Okay? There were a lot of entities that were both organizational as well as non-organizational, which were doing events, but they were all doing very expensive events. Right? So, and I'm not talking about people can't afford it, but it was an overkill for the amenities provided, or for the services provided, or for whatever, right? So by standards of the event, it was a very huge price to pay. So we're like, okay, let's do an event which people are going to look at and say, hey, listen, that's not freaking possible in that kind of a price point. And then we do the actual event, and then that basically stirs the public and says, ha, so events can be done like that. So we basically tried to be the geo to the whole event industry in Hong Kong, and that's what we managed to do somehow. And a lot of it was, of course, like I mentioned, all thanks to the subsidies that we got. But even without that, we understood that a lot of contracting, if done right, can make things easier for us to pull the event off at a low cost. So these were the initial struggles that we had. But like I mentioned, like we learned it the hard way. This is there's so many young entrepreneurs who have like motivational speakers and things like that, and actually have mentors, proper mentorship programs in India now for entrepreneurship, which I think is amazing. And these haven't, I think these have taken off since the past 5-6 years tops. Before that, I don't think they were as well heard of, or even if they were around, I don't think they were as actively being viewed, or people weren't taking it so seriously, because entrepreneurship culture in India came a little too late. I'm not talking about business culture, because that was there like forever. People would have their own shops and establishments and things like that. And that's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about innovation. I'm talking about tech entrepreneurs. I'm talking about those kind of things, right? So an awareness towards this, because it was always being viewed as a very risky position to be in, and awareness and a will for people to go into this with a more open mind has come up very recently, in my opinion. So um, it's just now people have proper mentorship programs, people have the right channels to go through. I never had that. I had to fall, I had to get back up, and then I had to learn that. I mean, now people are a lot more lucky, because then I am also a part of a mentorship program on a Delhi based organization called FEA. So as a matter of fact, I just finished a session with those guys, and then I joined this interview, right? So it's just one of those things where you can help people and people can help you, and it's a very conducive environment now. But back in the day, it wasn't so much so, right? So it wasn't as accessible. Now it is. So I'm glad that some of the challenges we used to face are also being resolved. So yeah, those were my challenges, man. Those are the things that, yeah.
You also mentioned not a lot of people supported when you told your decision to start your own thing. So, how difficult was it to find your own inner circle? Because you can only have as much as positivity when you have people around you who instill that positive influence over you. So, how difficult was it? And do you have like your inner circle?
Uh, when I started off with entrepreneurship, right? Since we were just talking about that, I literally had just enough to make the tuition and maybe even make my living situation. Because at the time, even that became a little difficult, right? So financially, it was just one of those things where, uh, like, if people ask me today, what was it like running a business then or starting a business then, I give them a very simple analogy and I tell them, Usain Bolt is fast. He runs quick. Put a hound chasing him, right? Put a dog after him, he's going to run even faster. So it was, for me, it was that. I was literally running away from a financial problem, trying to keep away from a financial problem through the business that I was running. I did not have an option to form an inner circle that supported my idea, because it was a necessity based thing, right? For me, it was like necessity is the mother of invention. It was one of those things. So I said, I need to run, bro. I need to do this thing, whether the world supports me with it or it doesn't. But eventually, when people saw, and I'm talking about both family as well as friends, when people saw that I was pulling off events like this and we were doing good things, um, people obviously came in support. People were very happy about it. I think what happened was a few of my close friends from my undergrad as well. They sort of came on to a couple of camping events and they were like, all right, what you're doing is pretty darn sweet, right? And that's when they saw it and they were like, all right, you're doing a good thing, you're doing things, this is profitable. If this is the product you're putting out, yeah, people will buy. And honestly speaking, I, more than wanting an inner circle or more than wanting to validate myself through the eyes of others, I wanted the market to validate me. I was more like, validate my work, validate the product I'm putting out. I don't care about whether people are validating what I'm doing or not in my personal life. That's irrelevant. Maybe I'll go home someday. Maybe I'll face backlash from my family. Maybe I'll face backlash from my friends when I go meet them. There will be a snarky joke about struggling as an entrepreneur. There'll be something. There'll be something that is always going to, people are never going to see, never going to believe that you're doing what you love, and people are never going to relate with your journey till they actually see it in action and till they see that you're doing well. So for me, it was like a vicious cycle where I was like, okay, if my product gets validated, the people are happy, these guys are automatically going to realize this guy is doing something right. Yeah. So for me, it was one of those things. I was like, let the market validate, right? Let the people that like our events come to me and tell me in their half drunken stupor, Sid, freaking awesome event, right? So that was the kind of validation I always seek. And because that happened, people around me understood that I was going through this and why I was going through it and what the motive was. Even with the event company over here that I opened up, exact same thing. A lot of people very iffy about, different circle, of course. A lot of people very iffy about, you have an engineering degree in your hand. What do you really want to do this? It's like, yeah, I want to do it because I think it's profitable. Is it really though? Yes, it is. You want to watch me do it? Please watch me do it. And then I built a portfolio around what I do. So I think your work speaks volumes, right? I think the best way to justify what you're doing to the people you love, because yes, it is important sometimes to justify it to the people that you love and the people around you and the people that care about you, because eventually maybe if not entirely, there's definitely a good to fair amount of their mind saying the things that they do out of pure concern, because they love you, they don't want to see you fall, they don't want to see you break, and things like that. But you're your own driver, right? You're in your own life, you're like the main hero in your own life, you know exactly which way your life is going, right? So there's nobody who can tell you what to do with your life better than yourself. That's something I believe, right? So if I choose this is the path for me, I'm going to definitely stick to it and I'm going to gun for it and I'm going to go ahead with it. So I feel like back then I faced a lot of backlash. Even with the channel, I faced a lot of backlash. Have I found the inner circle yet? Yes, I have. And I'm going to take this opportunity to give a huge shout out to the people that have always supported me. Everyone on the channel that has come onto the channel, they've been part of my event circle sometimes. Some of them haven't. So it's always a pleasure working with these people. All the folks back in Goa, I have to thank all of them for all the support that they've given. Of course, mom and dad to a great extent for putting up with my crazy sleep schedules and things like that. Even now, my sleep schedules are all messed up. I've been sleeping for like 2-3 hours a day for the past 1 week, and they're like, "Oh, you know what? You really need rest." I'm like, I wake up like a zombie in the morning at 9, and I'm like, "Oh, never mind. I have work." But I would also like to thank my girlfriend. I have to thank Malvika because Malvika's sort of done a lot in terms of motivating me through actual conceptualization. So it's one thing for someone to be there in support of you, in solidarity or whatever it is, which by the way I highly appreciate. But it's another thing to step in and sort of give you constructive advice, which a lot of other people have as well, right? Like a lot of the people that I have interviewed have given me a lot of constructive advice, and it's always helpful. And I always take those advices and I say, all right, what can be done about it? So Malvika has been someone who's constantly been with me throughout that. She was one of the first few people that I had interviewed, and she's been like the guiding light for me throughout this whole thing, because she has an amazing marketing background. She's a marketing entrepreneur herself, so she's like proper like PR, branding, marcom. She's amazing with visual arts. So how a product looks, right? And whether it's appropriate, because something could look amazing, but without the correct context, like I mentioned, context plus information equals content. Without the right context, even that visual image doesn't sell as well. So in that regard, she has been a massive support system to me, making things look the right way. There have been times where she's like, Sid, I know you've spent a lot of time, or I've spent a lot of time doing this. I don't think it sits well. There's no point of putting out a mediocre product. And then we go back to the drawing board and things like that. So uh, she's been a very active part of the creative process in Orbata. But I think everyone who has who's ever shaken, like who's ever shook my hand, right, for any kind of business, I would definitely think that they are the inner circle, right? Because in every phase where I started something new, there were new challenges, and I always needed people around. Like for Apsuna, I definitely like to thank Meena, obviously, because she brought this to me. She brought it to me knowing that I was capable of doing it. And I asked her one day casually, I was like, Meena, why me? She's like, it's about the people. It's about the people you work with, right? And people like this have trusted me with projects. There have been times where people haven't trusted me with projects as well. They're like, he's just an 18-year-old boy. What's he gonna run an event company for, or how is he gonna go about it? So I mean, there've been both extremes of life, but now I have generated an inner circle. There are people who are there to support me, and I know for a fact that they're always going to be around, and that's just a very beautiful feeling to know that at the end of the day there's someone to sort of support you at the back end. So that's amazing. Yeah.
What is your dream with Arbata?
Ooh. um i I think with all the projects that I've been currently working on Orbita, like all the videos I've been working on, um we are diversifying, right? Eventually the central goal is going to be the same. The central goal is going to be learning.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the learning is going to happen through not through just passive learning or listening to someone or things like that. It's also going to be very hands on, very active. So if I want to talk about tutorials and things like that, that's something that will definitely come up. We are yet to properly host live sessions and things like that, so that will definitely come up. Like I mentioned, with those tutorials and things like that, I'm calling it master classes. That's something that we are going on to talk about, things that are not necessarily taught on the mainstream too much. So those are things that we are exploring right now. With Orbata, the other thing is we need to create mainstream appeal for it. Like that's basically kind of why we are doing well, is because we have tried to make it as casual as possible. Like I feel, if I call it a learning platform, people aren't going to learn from it because they're going to sit with a mindset of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you're in the mood to learn. A lot of people's attitudes towards learning isn't necessarily about sitting, understanding what the other person's saying, making notes. Maybe that's the impression people have of learning. Right? We don't want it to be that way. We just want it to be, I listen to your story, you listen to my story. You get a lot of lessons out of just our experiences alone, right? So that is something that we definitely wanted to do. Like I wanted to do with Orbata, but so that's going to carry on. That's going to carry on. It's going to be a very mainstream, casual platform. And if you're talking about a dream, yeah, when are we hitting 1 million? Yeah, but, like I'm not stopping. I don't think any content creator should stop. uh, Considering like being a learning platform, also like a self-proclaimed learning platform, I know a lot of people would say it's a learning platform, it's not a subscriber based thing. You shouldn't care about how many subscribers there are. Why not? Why not? Why not increase the reach and the outreach of the program, or the reach and the outreach of the channel or the platform itself? If the sub count is a good measure of it, why not? Right? Why not?
True.
So I mean, we're getting there. We're getting there. We're inching closer every day, and that's a very exciting experience for me. So I'm thrilled about the direction this is going in. Yes, we will be introducing newer aspects to the whole thing, and you know newer playlists, newer kinds of videos, and things like that. There's something already in the making right now, by the way, which we're going to introduce, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with learning per se, but when you look at it, it's at the end of the day, it's promoting a learning culture at the end of the day. So those kind of things we're working on, right? So a lot of things to come, a lot of things to come for sure. Yeah.
So I always end the interviews with this question. So if we were to meet after 1 year, what should you have accomplished to say that this has been a really successful year?
I don't know, Ajmal. I don't know, my friend. It's just, um, if you're talking about a goal, for me, for the company, I would like to lose 10 more kilos. So you'll find me a little thinner. For the company, I'd want to, um, the company would be operational. Let's hope by next year. Uh, Events would have kicked off. Let's hope Corona is healed. Healed, at least there's a solution to it. There's a vaccine to it. If not, we have grown immune to it. Let's hope for that. Let's hope that the channel takes off very well. Let's hope we're much closer to the silver plaque, like at least by next year, end of next year, maybe by December 2021, maybe we're closer to 100K. Let's hope we are. But again, it's just like, if I'm going to set these expectations for myself, I'm just going to put myself under the pressure of achieving that level of success. And I think that's not something I want to do. Like I mentioned, like when I started the YouTube channel, I was going through a lot of different videos and channels in general. I was trying to figure out, all small and big. I was looking at successful channels as to why they were successful, and I was looking at unsuccessful channels, why they were not so successful, right? And what I realized was, it's the there were a lot of issues in terms of content creation that people were facing. Like, they weren't able to put out very personalized content. Some of them were putting out very repetitive content. Some of them were did not find a niche, and they were just trying to stick themselves into a content driven thing where everyone's doing it, so if I do it, I will also be successful. That's not how it works. um, the need to gain popularity, or the need to fulfill a certain goal to success, took precedence over actual creation, took precedence over the actual process of creating that content, the actual process of going about making things happen. And when that happens, you are just so focused on your sub count. You're just so focused on, how many views did I get? How many views did I get? What's my reach today? What's my click through ratio? I mean, okay, fine. I get that you need to take a look at it, but that shouldn't take precedence over the actual process of creating content. So, and I know there are actual channels on YouTube that are basically based on just making it, getting it to monetization, and then leaving it there, and then creating videos just to sort of, get it to monetization. Like, people are literally stealing content left, right, and center from TikTok, from other YouTubers, just posting it just for the monetization aspect of things, right? And I don't know how sustainable that is. Like, that may be sustainable for now, but that's not a very sustainable model to work with at the end of the day. So I feel like, even if I were to meet you like a year from now, I don't know, like, I would like to get closer to 100K, but if I don't, it's fine, because if I meet you 1 year from now, I will definitely be making better content than I'm making today. That is a damn guarantee. Like, that is for sure, right? So yeah, I think I just want to get better at doing what I do. I still feel this is an initial phase that I'm at. I just want to get better. I think everyone should sort of aim at doing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sidhush, for spending some time with me and
Oh,
sharing your
thank you.
insights.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was amazing.